Welcome back. This is Act 2, Scene 3. The first interesting thing to say here is that Othello calls Cassio Michael, which is a very personal name, obviously, sorry. And obviously by calling him by his first name, it suggests that relationship that we learnt together in lesson when we looked at Act 3, Scene 3 and how upset Cassio is. But the other important thing here is, if you have a look you to the guard tonight. Othello is setting Cassio a job. He's basically telling him to keep an eye and make sure that they do not outsport discretion, which if you look on the English version, not to let the party get too wild. So actually, when you think about the fact that Othello trusted Cassio to stop the party from getting too wild, and then actually Cassio was the one who got drunk and started a fight, you can see that actually he has let Othello down there. Cassio's let him down. He then says, Cassio, that he will look to it, so he agrees. But he does say here about Iago. Iago knows what he needs to do as well, so Iago's helping out. And Othello says Iago is most honest for about the 10th time in the play. Okay, so moving down. Again, he repeats Michael, so we get this idea of them having a very close relationship. It tells him good night, and he wants to speak to him as early as possible in the morning. Now, as we know from Act 3, Scene 3, it actually ends up being Iago that he sees the next morning, and Iago who he works with to end the war and send off those last final letters. He then speaks very nicely to Desdemona. Come, my love, the purchase made. So now our wedding is over. The fruits are to ensue, and the profits yet to come. In other words, we can go away now and have the pleasure of consummating our marriage. So again, this makes it worse later on when he is disturbed because of Cassio's fight. He's actually left his marriage bed to go and sort this fight out. It's kind of like interrupting somebody on honeymoon. So again, another reason why Othello might have quite rashly demoted Cassio. However, you obviously have that main reason that it was Montano who was injured and Othello's hands were tied. What this is, though, is another example of where Othello has sort of, because he's now being pulled in two directions, he's got this inner conflict between his loving side with Desdemona, his role as a husband, and his conflict and his more masculine side in his role as a general. If Desdemona was not here, Othello would not be in bed. He would be there with Cassio, with Iago, and Iago wouldn't have had as much power. So we can argue that Iago takes advantage of Othello's distraction, and Desdemona is the distraction. Okay. So off goes Othello and Desdemona to have a nice time. And then in comes Iago, right on cue, as always. So Cassio says to him, we must to the watch, so it's time for us to do our duty. Again, suggesting that Cassio takes his duty very seriously. And Iago leads him astray. Not at this hour, Lieutenant. It's not yet 10 o'clock. So, the general got rid of us early because of Desdemona. And basically, he hasn't spent the night with her yet. He have not yet made wanton the night with her. And she is sport for Jove. So in other words, she is, he's going to have a nice time with her. Cassio agrees. She's a most exquisite lady. But yet again, if you have a look at the difference in the language here, there's the same juxtaposition that is used in Act 1 between Roderigo and Iago. Iago is constantly being the sort of bawdy character who's making the rudest comments or the crudest comments about Desdemona. We've got exquisite from Cassio, and then we've got full of game from Iago, which really reduces her to a sexual object. Cassio responds with, she is a most fresh and delicate creature. Again, two lovely adjectives there to describe her. While Iago again reduces her. She's basically got eyes that look like an invitation to bed. So again, Iago is treating her like a sexual object. And then Cassio, if you notice, Cassio doesn't defend Desdemona. He doesn't challenge Iago on his language. Perhaps this is a night that represents this idea that, nobody particularly likes to challenge Iago. They accept him for who he is. Because Cassio could here be saying, oh, you've been a bit rude about your general's wife here. But what Cassio is doing is she's sort of taking Iago's idea. So, for example, she has nice eyes, such inviting eyes. Cassio agrees, but then he turns it into something that's a little bit more like kinder, when he says he thinks that she's very modest. Okay. But yet again, Iago takes back to passion, and then Cassio says she is indeed perfection. Okay, so the whole exchange, really, you can see Iago's just playing with Cassio, but what's interesting is that Cassio never stops being a gentleman here. Or arguably you could say Shakespeare's enforcing the idea that Cassio does favour her, that he does find her attractive. Happiness to the sheets is Iago pretending that he would like them to have a good time in bed. Ironic, given that his plan later leads to him killing her in bed, Othello killing Desdemona in bed. And here we have the next part of Iago's plan. Come, lieutenant, I have a stoup of wine, and here without are a brace of Cyprus gallants that would fain have a measure to the health of black Othello. So he's basically saying, I've got a jug of wine, and we need to drink a toast to Othello. Note the adjective black there. And obviously he knows that Cassio is easy to get drunk, and this is all part of his plan. He told Roderigo in the last scene that he was going to get Cassio drunk so that he could provoke him into a fight. So that Roderigo could provoke him into a fight. Cassio at first refuses. He says, not tonight, good Othello. I have very poor and unhappy brains for drinking. So he admits, and he's aware of his own flaw, that he shouldn't be drinking that much. But he also wishes courtesy would invent some other custom of entertainment. He actually wishes that people didn't always get drunk to have a good time, and that he could just it was okay to be sober. And this is something we might still find in our own society, where a lot of our, as an adult, a lot of social engagements are built around drinking. Iago, in his great persuasion, but these are our friends, just have one cup, I'll drink for you. Cassio says he's already drunk one. So actually, he can't really have another one. That's his limit. So he's been very sensible at first. I'll just tell you that quote is, I have but one cup tonight, and that was craftily qualified too. And behold what innovation it makes here. In other words, it's already making me look drunk. So he realizes, as he says here, I am unfortunate in the infirmity and dare not task my weakness with any more. I can't make myself any less drunk. I really can't. Any more drunk. So he's attempting to stay in control. Now, what we can argue here is that, obviously we know that he does end up drunk. Iago is such a master manipulator that he's able even to take somebody who's determined not to drink and is so self-aware of his own flaws, he can even manipulate someone like that. So Iago says, oh, come on, it's a night of celebration. It's a night of revels. Come on, everyone's desiring it. And Cassio's like, oh, where are they? And Iago says, they're here at the door. I pray you call them in. And Cassio says, I'll do it, but it dislikes me. I don't like doing it. Now, basically, Cassio's been won over here by social pressure. He's been won over by the idea that other people want to party, so he feels like he should too. You might question and think and explore and evaluate, well, to what extent does therefore Cassio deserve to lose his reputation? If people who have the upper authority and people who do command utter respect wouldn't lose their own morals like that, wouldn't be so easily convinced or manipulated. Obviously in Act 3, Othello is manipulated extensively, but as we see at the end of this act, Othello doesn't lose his sense of authority because he's in love with Desdemona. He keeps it. Cassio here is losing his sense of authority just because he wants to please Iago. You might have a different interpretation of it, though. You might feel a bit more favourable to him. Okay, so this is now an aside because Cassio leaves now. So we're left with Iago on the stage by himself. And he says, if I can fasten but one cup upon him, with that which he has already drank tonight, he'll be full of quarrel and offence as my young mistress's dog. So he's basically saying he's already a bit drunk. So if I give him one more drunk, he's going to be full of quarrel, which means he's going to be easy to provoke into a fight, which is obviously what Roderigo's going to do. He then says, now my sick fool, Roderigo. Okay, so he's insulting his friend. He calls him a sick fool. He's sick because he's lovesick. And he says, whom love have turned almost the wrong side out. There's an indication here that Iago is not a fan of love as an emotion. He certainly doesn't seem to feel it for anyone. I can't even find evidence really that he loves himself. So Rodrigo is to the watch, and he's going to be ready to go and obviously get Cassio. He then says, 3 lads of Cyprus, noble swelling spirits, they that hold their honours in a weary distant, the very elements of this warlike isle, have I tonight flustered with flowing cups. So he's also got the guards drunk, and then also other gentlemen who are going to take offence. So he's basically got most people on the island drunk, and if you have a look at the English version, that'll make it clearer. So now he's planning on basically putting our Cassio in some action that may offend the Isle. And it does work because he ends up offending Montano, who is a really important person, who's also partially drunk, presumably because of Iago. Okay. So he says, here they come. In consequence, but to prove my dream, my boat sails freely, both wind and stream. So here is more sort of naval language linked to ships and saying, my boat sails freely. The wind and stream are in my sort of supporting my actions. I am bound for success. Nothing is getting in my way. Iago is the storm. Yeah, Iago's bringing all of the tragedy, all of the misery. And it's almost literally right on cue. In come Cassio, Montano, and the gentleman. Obviously, the 2 names there that are important, Cassio, Montano, are the guys who end up fighting in the end. And Cassio, obviously, there's been a bit of a time skip here because somebody could, well, actually, Cassio is a bit of a lightweight, so maybe you could, but Shakespeare's pace is effective here. We've got a short side from Iago to move the story on. Cassio's now drunk. They have given me a rouse already, a lot to drink. Montano says, good faith, a little one, not past a pint, as I am a soldier. Now, obviously, Montano doesn't know how Cassio can't really handle his drink. And then you can always rely on Iago to make something worse. Some wine. So he asks for more wine. He starts singing. You've got to remember that in this scene, actually, Iago would be the life and soul of the party. Everyone would canter around him, singing along with him. He's bringing so much joy and exuberance to the scene. Cassio responds with an excellent song. He's really excited. We learn from Iago that he learned it in England, where they are most potent in potting, which is drinking. So that suggests that Iago has travelled. Nothing much comes of that really, but it's just interesting to note. There's just more comments about whether Englishmen are heavy drinkers. Basically, this is almost like phatic talk. That's small talk. So they're just talking about drinking at a party, just making small idle chit-chat. Until Cassio says something actually important. He says, to the health of our general, and he drinks to the health of Othello, which is ironic because by drinking, he's actually being part of a plot that will lead to his death. And then Montano agrees and he says, I'll do you justice, so I'll match you. Everything you drink, I'll drink. So they're both drunk, and obviously Iago's a massive part of why that's happened. You need to think about here as well, I think, Iago loves this. Iago really enjoys it. And basically what he's doing here, you could argue, is he's basically bringing everyone down to his level. He revels in this kind of atmosphere, in this sort of bawdy, rebellious, out of control atmosphere. He's basically bringing everyone down with him. Yeah, if Cassio had sort of been like, no, we must be serious, we must do our duties properly, that's going to sort of make Iago feel bad about himself because he doesn't want to do that. So it's this idea that almost, if you think of him as a bully and how bullies don't like to be on their own and they like to have a support network of people who are equally bullyish with them because it sort of reinforces their behaviour. Iago just, you could argue his entire plot is his attempt really to make the world feel more like he feels all the time. Like he feels or enjoys all this negativity around him, and he just wants to bring people down to the sort of level that he lives in, arguably. Okay, more singing, because what is a party without singing? And then Cassio's, wow, that is a more exquisite song than the other. So he's basically put it in Iago's hands. Would you want to hear it again? Oh, no, we shouldn't be doing that. No, and then the Cassio, you can see how drunk he is now because he said, well, heaven's above all. In other words, well, you know, God's in charge. We'll all be fine. Okay? And it's a bit of an anonymous response here. When he says some souls must be saved and there are souls which will not be saved, Iago says that is true. And there's sort of this anonymous sense to that Iago is obviously sort of, eventually ends up being responsible for murders and costing these souls their lives. Also, he's kind of okay with that. He's okay with the fact that his soul may not be saved because he is a bad person. Okay, and Cassio says, no offence to the general, nor any man of quality. I hope I've never hurt anybody who's important, including Othello, who he keeps calling as the general. I think that's worth highlighting, that he calls him by his title, which is utter respect, because Othello calls him Michael, but he calls him by his title. So he holds him on a pedestal. He holds him as in a position of power. But he says, I hope I'm going to heaven. Now, given that Cassio is one of the few people still alive at the end of the play, and he doesn't actually do anything wrong, given that Montano does live. I mean, it might be worth saying here as well. Sorry, I was just going to say before that, you know, he is a good person. He would be saved. And that's the general opinion of the audience, you could argue. But really, he does do something bad. Obviously, we're going to see the fight in a minute. But if he had killed Montano, that would be manslaughter. And that would still obviously be tragic. So he really, really should have controlled himself here. He's supposed to be on duty. I think from the lesson in this, I'm definitely reading Cassio in a very negative way. Don't forget, you can evaluate and disagree. Okay, and Iago says, and so do I, Lieutenant. Well, is he though? Is he going to heaven? Okay, he basically says, let us be saved, let us go to heaven. But then he says, let us have no more of this, let's get to our affairs, forgive us our sins. So, let's have no more drinking, we're doing something bad here. Hopefully God will forgive us. And he says, gentlemen, let's look to our business. Do not think, gentlemen, that I am drunk. And you can actually imagine him being drunk as he says this, and I'm sure all of you who've seen the stage version can remember how this is acted out. He's trying to do his duty, and he's almost not really self-aware that he is drunk here. This is my ancient, so Iago. This is my right hand, and this is my left. I am not drunk now. I can stand well enough, and I speak well enough. So he's lacking self-awareness there, but obviously this is played for comedy in most of the times we've seen the play. And everyone's just like, yay, brilliant, brilliant. And he says, right, very well then. You must not think that I am drunk. Right, this repetition of him saying, don't think that I'm drunk, highlights that Cassio is very, very keen again to protect his reputation. He's feeling guilty. He knows he's done something wrong. That's why he's telling God to forgive his sins. So he's actually almost regretting what he's done now, but it's too late for him to do anything about it. Okay, so they listen to Cassio, and Montano says, let's go to the watch. We'll go and stand guard. Right, so Montano is left behind to speak to Iago. And this is where Iago twists the knife even deeper into Cassio's back. And that will be coming to you in video 2.